John, can you tell me a time that you ever considered quitting and why?
Man, I'm like, you're gonna make me emotional for this, honestly. I'm like, it's hard for me, honestly, right now. It's really hard for me right now. But I still try every day to put a lot into it. Man, I can't believe I'm getting emotional about this question.
Welcome to Forever White Belt. I'm your host, Adolfo Ferranda. Today on the show, I'm thrilled to bring you an incredible interview with none other than Jonathan Satava. John is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under the legendary Marcelo Garcia, part of the golden generation of grapplers from Garcia's New York Academy, regarded as one of the top prospects in the 82 kilogram, 181 pound weight class. John has achieved remarkable victories at the World's, Pan American Championships, and World Pro in the lower belt divisions. He solidified his reputation at the black belt level with a double gold performance at the Nogi Pan American, back-to-back silver medals at the Nogi World Championships, a third place finish at the Abu Dhabi World Pro, and winning the North American ADCC Trials. Beyond his impressive competition record, John has been a dedicated instructor at the Marcelo Garcia Academy in New York City, taught seminars worldwide, and been featured in tons of jiu-jitsu media and instructional content. Now he shares his 15-plus years of knowledge, experience, and passion for the general art at Peak Jiu-Jitsu in both League City, Texas, and Patchogue, New York. His instructionals are highly sought after on the major platforms. I'm so honored to have John on the show today. He truly straddles the worlds of traditional and modern jiu-jitsu. And with that, I give you Jonathan Satava. John, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Adolfo, how you doing?
Man, it is such a joy for me to have you on. What did we do, like 24 hours notice or something like that? And we made this happen. I'm so happy. That's how bad I wanted to do this. I typically do weeks of research and stuff, but I know quite a bit of your story, and I hope to learn even more now. You're one of these really interesting guys because you have one foot in the early days of jiu-jitsu and in this modern times. There's some of you guys that have done this, but on top of that, in terms of like your competitive accolades and how you've transitioned to be like a instructor, owner, entrepreneur, if you will, you've also rode the whole spectrum of the jiu-jitsu technology, I want to say, in terms of the instructional platforms. I mean, you were like on Budo and all these things, you're fanatics. I mean, you're everywhere. Now you're like Jiu-Jitsu X and all over the place, and I've witnessed all this myself and I've learned so much from you. I just want to say thank you so much for, doing all that you've done for some of us that have been in the game for a while.
Oh, well, thank you, and thanks for making this happen. It's busy now with 3 kids and the 2 schools and everything, so, I appreciate the flexibility. And, yeah, I never really, thought about that, but that's true with, how much jiu-jitsu has developed, especially with the addition of technology and social media and stuff like that. I remember not having Instagram and stuff being on DVDs and magazines. I don't think magazines even are magazines anymore, so, it's crazy.
When you came along, it was kind of the end of these VHS tapes that were showing sort of these rudimentary sort of instructionals. And then you kind of came along when, like, as you mentioned, DVDs and that type of thing. And early streaming with the, MG stuff, Marcelo Garcia stuff, where you were the uke and then you came to the 4 as well. What has that been like in terms of like putting yourself out there initially? You didn't see a lot of that back then.
Yeah, it was honestly an adjustment and something that I'm just still to this day trying to work on to embrace because it's such a necessity. I remember I had won a brown belt world championship and my Instagram was so private, you know what I'm saying. So I was just
Great
I didn't want to
there, John.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to deal with any of that stuff. I just thought it was a distraction. I just thought it was noise. But it's like anything. It's how you use it. It's a tool. And my coach had a website, MG in Action, that I think was one of the first platforms for jiu-jitsu, and that just helped my development. And so I see definitely the purpose for it, but for some reason at that time I was just so resistant to embracing it, and now I'm just kind of getting more comfortable with that, I guess I would say.
let's talk about New York to Texas. I understand now that you own Peak Jiu-Jitsu. There was a Peak Jiu-Jitsu in New York, and I'm not sure if that's still around. You'll have to bring us up to speed on that. But I know now you're in a place called League City, Texas, which I believe is your wife's hometown, and you have a Peak Jiu-Jitsu there as well. Can you give us the story of that?
I still have my school in New York, and I still, go there at least quarterly. I try to go there every other month, honestly. We opened up another school here in Texas, and it was just kind of one of those things where, there was kind of like a turn of the tide in New York as far as like trying to run a business there, and the price of living, and also like the whole going through COVID as a competitor and a business owner was like very, very difficult. And so we just decided like, okay, if we're not going to be near my family in New York, let's go near her family in Texas. So we just kind of packed up, moved, started all over again. And thankfully, like the response has been great, and everything's still going well in New York. I have my head coach Todd over there, and Nick and a couple other guys helping out. So it's been a blessing to have everything go well twice, I guess. So, sometimes doesn't always go that way. So
Peak Jiu-Jitsu Texas. So you're just outside of Houston now. What has that been like in terms of that demographic and the type of people you're getting? I would imagine you're sort of in it's kind of a suburb outside of there.
Yeah, so I think we're like half an hour outside of Houston, but Texas is, or at least Houston's kind of crazy. Houston is huge, so you can drive like 2 hours and still be in Houston. So it's wild. But as far as, the demographic, it's a mix, honestly. I have some guys who really want to compete. Believe it or not, I have a lot of masters guys who like take it like pretty seriously. One of the head coaches there just got double gold at American Nationals in his Masters division. I have another coach as purple belt who's doing well there in Masters. So, and then obviously we have our hobbyists, we have our kids and stuff like that. But League City is one of those bigger suburbs. Like I want to say there's like 150,000 people in League City, which is pretty big for a town. So
I'm so glad you brought up this Masters trend or growth thing that you've noticed, because everyone that I'm talking to and all these academy owners, they're all telling me a similar thing, that they're noticing this sort of kind of untapped market that's seeing a lot of growth. How are you addressing them?
It's something that I'm learning myself, I feel like. So it's crazy to think how old I am right now. But I don't like push them as much, whereas like when I say push them, I don't mean mentally, I mean like physically. Like, so like I have a couple younger guys here who are like, I think one's 20 and a couple other ones who are in their early 20s, and they kind of know that I expect them to train a lot. And especially if you're going to compete and you tell me you want to compete, okay, that's different than, you're just kind of casually doing this. But if you tell me you want to be serious, like as my coach, I feel like it's part of my job to hold you accountable. And so like being that young, now's the time to put as much time as you can in and kind of push yourself, especially your body, because now's the time where you can not have to think about that and figure out that other stuff to make your body still go when you get older. And whereas like my masters guys, it's like, it's almost about more like, okay, like we're not going to have as many sessions, but we have to make sure we're having the quality sessions, or the session might have to be different, maybe not as much live 100% rolling, maybe more drilling or specific training at like a 80% or 70% or something like that. That's one of the things that I'm always trying to remind them, like, okay, even if you can't go on the mat as much because you don't feel as good as you used to when you were younger, like we still have to figure out a way how we can still grow and kind of do the best that we can. And obviously they have the other challenges too of like juggling like a family and usually career. So it could be a lot, but I always try to set that example because I have I have 3 kids now, I have 2 businesses, and I always come right back to the training no matter what, and I'm always training still a lot. So I try to lead by an example, so I hope they pick up on that,
I've heard you mention before that you didn't really drill when you were younger, and you make your students drill now quite a bit. I'm curious if you've heard of the ecological approach. Are you doing any of that kind of stuff in terms of any constraint-led type of stuff?
Yeah, so if we have a focus of the week, we'll definitely incorporate that. To be honest, I never even heard that it was like called that. I used to train like that with Marcello. I remember doing games and stuff like that before, and they just didn't have a name for it, but I guess they make a name, but that's good though. So, but yeah, we definitely incorporate some of that, and I feel like, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or something, but like I really have been stressing more to people here that they need to like drill more or think more about doing stuff like that, because for whatever reason, like I felt like in New York, like the team there, or my students there, they always had like that motivation just to kind of like ask a question and then do it on their own, like basically get together and like, okay, I got to drill it until I get it. Whereas like here, I feel like it's a little bit more, I don't want to say like nervous, but it's almost like a respect thing. They're almost like too shy to ask me like a question and how they should approach and stuff like that. So I find myself being like a lot more just being like telling them what to do, which is another thing that like I have to get more comfortable with as a coach, because it's just not my nature. But since I've been starting to like really like force that, like, okay, like, no, we're you guys, I don't see you guys practicing this position. You guys need to practice this position. So we're going to use our class time to practice this position, whether it's through drilling, whether it's through a game, whether it's through some specific training or whatever. Since I've been like forcing that more, I feel like everybody's been improving a lot. So it wasn't something that like I felt that like I had to do. I felt like people in New York, for whatever reason, like took it upon themselves to do that and also like seek it out. But here in Texas, like I said, I think it's just like a culture thing or something. Not as many people were like up for that. But since I started like forcing, I'm like noticing like good improvement from the students.
That's interesting. Is that like a generational thing, you think? Because what I've been hearing too from some other coaches, they've been noticing a similar pattern in terms of younger people. And then I know Jonathan Haidt has a book about like this Generation Z, and that devices have made them like that, you know, kind of shy and more quiet.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like that, or who knows what could be the cause. But all I know is like you said, like I've seen this too. Like I think like one of my teammates or training partners, like Gianni, like said the same thing. He's like, people are just like showing up and going like pojada or whatever, like going hard, and then they just leave. It's like when I was coming up, when we were coming up, we were on the mat like problem solving a lot. Like, okay, what did you do to me here, or how does this feel? And kind of it was a lot more of a conversation. I feel like that was something that I was kind of missing, and I was like, how do I develop that culture here? So we're working on that, you know.
I had just had a conversation with John Calistine, and he and someone you know, Eddie Cummings, would do a lot of that too. He would mention, right, a lot of that conversational, hey, what do you think of this? Let's work on this particular thing over and over. And hey, was this working? Let's try this and that kind of thing. And it was very conversational.
Like I said, I got to see a lot of how to develop techniques, like what goes behind it. Is just sitting in a room somewhere for 2 hours, figuring out all the options off an outside scoop grip. I remember one time when I was a purple belt, he took me upstairs from Henzo's. It was me and a couple other people, and we sat there for like 2 hours just figuring out what to do with an outside scoop grip. Something as simple as that, but that's to the extent that he would go with his obsession in figuring things out.
And what you're describing it sounds like something with you and Gianni.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part to like the learning process, you know, and also like kind of feeling your way through moves, you know. A lot of times, I don't know if it's like people are used to being like fed it through like the phone, or like we said earlier, like the instructionals and something like that. Again, not saying it's a bad thing, but like we don't spend a lot of time feeling, you know what I mean? We just spend so much time like watching. And for me, that part of like the process, and then also the process of like bouncing ideas off one another versus just being like, oh, let me just look this up, you know what I'm saying? And so it was different. And going back to what you said before, I feel like I kind of have the best of both worlds, because I understand both, and because I came up in the middle, and so I know what it's like to be without it. I know what it's like to be with it. Like I said, I had to find that balance, but yeah, I feel like it's somewhere in the middle, like anything else. You know, you gotta be able to do both, and I'm trying to do that at my school. You know.
Just a reminder to please give us a 5-star review on Apple Music and Spotify, and become a VIP member for only 99 cents a month. Get ad-free episodes at anchor.fm/foreverwhitebelt/subscribe. And check us out on Instagram at Forever White Belt Show. Go buy your Forever White Belt swag at teespring.com/forever-white-belt. Check us out on YouTube now at Forever White Belt. Finally, if you ever get to beautiful Northern California, please come roll with us at North Bay Jiu-Jitsu in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. They're amazing instructors, and everyone there are great people. Mention the podcast and get 2 weeks free. It sounds like you're still in all these years of academy ownership and developing just as someone who's instructed classes for so long, even going back to Marcelo's. How are you sort of developing as a coach, instructor, teacher?
I treat it like jiu-jitsu. I'm never not trying to learn or trying to improve. I'm thinking about it a lot. And sometimes to the point where it like keeps me awake. You can never say I don't care, you know, because I care like so much. And there's certain things that I just feel like has helped. Like having a set fundamentals curriculum, I feel like has helped a lot. Has cleared up a lot of space for me mentally as a coach, and also kind of expectation wise, like for my students. I feel like, you know, our program for the fundamentals, I think you can complete it in like 3 months, which really isn't that long of a time. So if you go through it twice, that's 6 months. And I feel like it gives you like a great foundation and a great base to kind of operate from. And the next thing that we're kind of working on now is like somewhere of like an intermediate curriculum. That's
tricky.
It's very tricky, right? Because you have so many positions to choose from. You have so many moves to choose from. You have so many techniques to choose from. And, you know, you can choose the most, like, common ones and things like that, the ones that you see that are most successful. But it's a tricky thing because where do you stop? But at the same time, though, I still keep the advanced program very, like, free-flowing. So, like, if I see a common problem in the room or we go to the tournament and this person makes a mistake, it's like, well, let's learn from each other's mistakes. Let's address this all in one go here. So I do think it's important also not to have, you know, that structure there all the time. So that's kind of been my approach, at least as a coach, is kind of fleshing out that fundamentals curriculum, and I'm really proud of it. And then now we're kind of fleshing out the intermediate curriculum, and then after that, I'm not sure where to go next. But you think about, okay, competition training or something like that for people who are more serious, or pro training or something like that. But you know, we've only been open about 1.5 years here, so we're still kind of getting started.
Yeah, and it seems like the comp programs always tend to be smaller than the general programs in terms of return on investment and time put in. I mean, obviously you're a competitor, so that's important to you. What kind of strategies or anything are you thinking about in terms of trying to foster someone to want to compete, you know, and to encourage competing in your academy? Or is that something that you even think about?
It's definitely something that I think about a lot, and I don't want to ever force somebody to compete or put any expectations like that to compete, especially if they don't want to. But at the same time, we know so much, like, the benefits of it. And while we praise, like, the positive result and everything like that, you don't want to also, you know, like, deter them from competing because they're worried what you're going to think, or they're worried what their teammates are going to think and stuff like that. And so it's like anything. It's this fine line and fine balance person to person sometimes. But I always try to push them, like, because that's kind of my job as, like, a coach. So, like, if you tell me you're thinking about competing, it's like, okay, I'm going to push you to compete. But if you don't say anything, you're like, John, I don't want to compete, then, like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to go there. But, like, if you tell me, like, flat out, I don't want to compete, no problem at all. Let's still work. Let's still get better. Let's still, you know, improve. Because ultimately, if you focus on improvement, this is all something that I did, like, coming up, is for me, like, competition, don't get me wrong, like, and I know a lot of people, like, set out and they have these goals, like, okay, I want to win this tournament, I want to be a world champion, I want to be that. But for me, I always did the best when I was just like, I want to get better at jiu-jitsu. Okay, and like I just want to approach it from that. How can I get better at this position? How can I get better in this spot? And the tournament's gonna come as like a result of that. Like the wins are gonna come as a result of that. It's the same thing when you put it in that perspective too. It's like you do jiu-jitsu on the mat every day. Like let's just go do it on this mat instead today and get more data, get more kind of things to work on, or see what's working really well for you. Train with some different people. Go into it like that, and sometimes that framing kind of helps like give people like a little bit more of a nudge to go do something that's challenging and honestly has like a lot of meaning and reward, being with like your team and other stuff like that, you know.
John, can you give us an aha moment?
I just think about the time on the mat with my instructor, like after class, honestly, like the time on the mat with Marcello after class. That's probably most of the time where I had like my aha moments, is just kind of talking with him and working with him after. I wish I could point to something like more specific, but I'd probably be here all day if I counted like every technique. I bet you like 80% of them are on MG in action. So like like the guillotine stuff, the crucifix stuff. Aside from that, as far as like performance goes, Josh Waitskin really helped me out with that coming up during my brown belt years, and I still use some of the stuff that like we spoke about today as far as like performance. That'd probably be something that I can put my finger on a little bit easier than jiu-jitsu, because Marcello is just jiu-jitsu. Like it was like whenever I spoke to him or had a question, I would just work on that so hard for like that week, that month, until I got it. And then it's like, okay, let's go get another question. So like so much with him, but with like Josh, I can probably put my finger on it a little bit better as far as like competition goes. So Josh got me meditating, which was like a big help in my competition.
We're huge Josh Waitskin fans here, by the way.
Cool.
That's the name, Forever White Belt. That's like one of the things in terms of like beginner's mind. It's sort of a hat tip to one of his books that he wrote. So yeah.
Yeah, he's great, and I was fortunate enough to be close with him. We would probably during brown belt, I think like after every tournament, we would go out, get something to eat, and have a conversation, and it was just great to be able to kind of pick his brain and get his like direct feedback. He definitely got me meditating, which kind of got me more present and into the moment, which is where you want to be in competition. You don't want to be anywhere else but where your feet are, you know what I mean? And certain other concepts like turning it off to turn it on was like a big breakthrough for me that we went over. Also embracing my personality, even though my game and my body type was so similar to Marcelo's, the way that I needed to coach, or like my self-talk needed to operate, I guess, or my emotional state needed to operate was like different than his, at least from the conversations that we had. And so kind of embracing that really helped out a lot. And so those things helped me. I remember there were certain guys who like I lost to at the lower belt, and then at brown belt they couldn't touch me, and I feel like it was just mental. My jiu-jitsu was always there. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have been losing those guys to begin with, humbly, of course, but it just kind of like helped me get that together.
So you were getting in your own way, it sounds like.
Yeah, 100%. And to this day, it's still something that I'm still working on. You know, you hear about guys who do well in the room versus in the competition, and then I was always kind of somewhere in the middle. I had teammates who were the opposite. Like, you'd be in the room with them and you'd feel fine, and then they go out and kill it in the tournament, and you're just like, whoa. And then same thing, I had some teammates who you'd be in the room with them, they'd mess you up, but then they wouldn't come home with a medal that next weekend for whatever reason. So getting that together was kind of like some of my biggest like aha moments, at least as a competitor, if that makes sense.
Can you expand on what you mean to turn it on?
The thing that I started to do in competition was, you see a lot of guys kind of amp themselves up before a match, and not to say that, you know, for their personality type that might be what they need to do, but in my experience that wasn't the case. I was somebody who kind of needed to just like calm down. Like I'm naturally very like, I'm ready to go, I want to engage, I want to do jiu-jitsu the whole time, but how can we do jiu-jitsu and still approach it strategically? So before my matches, you know, I would just be laying down. I'm just like hood over my head. I'd meditate before. I do my warm-up, don't get me wrong, but that's as far as it'll go.
So you don't need me shaking you and giving you a slap then before you get on the mat?
No. It doesn't mean that it's not nice to have a partner to warm up with, but no, I'm not that guy who's, you know, like bouncing around, stuff like that. And I'm more of a relaxed fighter, and maybe that might not feel like it when I'm rolling or when I'm going, but mentally I'm relaxed, and that's where I need to be. I'm not this like angry fighter. It just wasn't something that did well for me, and I tried it, honestly. So being able to kind of recognize that, you know, I need to be in that relaxed state before competition to be able to be like on during the competition, during the mats, was huge. Josh gives an example about Marcello being actually kind of similar in this way, you know, and I remember being there actually for this World Championship in 2011, where they had the MG in action booth at the Pyramid, and so before Marcello's match, he's like lying down on the bench behind the booth with like a t-shirt over his head, and then just almost like walks on the mat, super relaxed, half asleep, but he looks like a ferocious animal out there. like you know what I'm saying? But I'm sure, like, at least for me, like, you know, having my mind kind of quiet really helped.
as you're sort of alluding to, like everyone sort of responds differently to different things in jiu-jitsu, whether it's like techniques and your expression of jiu-jitsu, the way you learn. It's so individual. And as I've been talking to like some other coaches and professionals as well, that a new thing that people are finally starting to address, I think more, not new, but it's becoming, it's bubbling up to the surface a lot more in terms of thinking in jiu-jitsu, is how anatomical differences should really be considered and sort of addressed in terms of instruction and teaching and training.
Yeah, look, one of the this kind of ties into this idea of like knowing yourself, right? And I think jiu-jitsu teaches you like so much about yourself, and spiritually, mentally, physically, like you're saying right now. And you have to know yourself and kind of like what makes you tick. Like I don't have long arms. The rear naked choke from the back with the arm in, or like the Darce choke for me, like isn't going to be there as easily for other people. You know, like the Toriano pass, I have to have it like good enough for people to like respect it. But my arms don't reach that long, so my legs can stay far away. You get what I'm saying? So I get caught up a lot there. But I can fit myself in like a small space. I can pummel my hand like really quick because my arm is short, and getting the underhook or something like that is like a little bit easier for me. Jiu-jitsu will teach you about yourself, and that's one of the things I also try to like tell my students too, is, you know, you can use jiu-jitsu as like a tool to kind of help your outside life. And when you're under that much stress of somebody trying to like choke you or put you in a joint lock or fight you or grapple you or whatever, like you're going to learn about yourself, and that could be very telling and helpful for your life, like outside of jiu-jitsu. Maybe not like how long your arms are, but you know, like as far as like the mental and the spiritual part goes, you know.
So John, can you tell me a time that you ever thought about, considered quitting, and why?
Man, I'm like you're going to make me emotional for this, honestly. I'm like it's hard for me, honestly, right now. It's really hard for me right now. But I still try every day to put a lot into it. And I can't believe I'm getting emotional about this question.
Well, thank you for sharing this. Yeah, this always gets heavy when I ask people this one.
It's funny because I never really like thought about like I never quit in my actions. You understand? Like I never quit in my actions. And what I mean by that is like I even have some peers that I talk to, because like any jiu-jitsu competitor, like, you know, you kind of like you go through it for different reasons. Sometimes you go through it because you lose. Sometimes you go through it because it's tough financially. Now I'm realizing sometimes you're going through it because you have like more responsibility on your plate. But what's funny is like some of my peers, and I'm not trying to talk bad about them, because I have some peers who don't do this also. They take a break, and when I say take a break, I mean they take some time off training, couple weeks, couple months, and then they get their motivation back up and go again. I never took a break. I remember sometimes you inevitably have to take a break because if something happens, like an injury happens, or like you're traveling or something like that, or you got some stuff to do. But like I never took a break, and I still don't take a break. And it's not because I don't take a break because like I feel like I need a break, I need to push through that. No, it's because like I really enjoy it. Like I really like it, and I love doing what I do, but it's getting harder, and I think that's like why I got like emotional. And it's funny, it's not even my body. Like sometimes I take really good care of myself, and I have some great people around to support that. It's just like the weight of the like responsibility that's been like really hard lately. And I had such a good training camp leading up to this past trials, and then I wasn't able to go out and compete in that trials because my wife had some complications in the pregnancy, so we needed to take the baby early. So I feel like almost like bad even admitting that, like saying like how much that disappointed me, because there's nothing more important obviously than my family and my kids, but like there's still that part of me that was like just like so disappointed, like not to go out there and stuff like that. And so it's hard too when like you see like I've had a lot of stuff, for better or worse, you know, not go my way for some reasons. And again, I don't want to make an excuse, but it's hard when you see some guys like who you do well against, you know, you're like, I should be there, or should be going there, and it's hard.
The thing with like that too is like we only have a finite window of time. to do what
Yes.
we do, and it breaks your heart.
Yes.
On top of that, you're spinning all these plates, which are just unimaginable. When I talk to you academy owners and 2 academies, my God, I mean, you guys are doing everything. As I always mention, you guys are the marketers, you're the plumbers, you're the instructors, you're the accountants. And you're a family man as well,
Yeah.
right? And on top of that, you have to be a competitor too. It's mind-boggling that you guys can do what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I try not. I have a blessed life. I'm not trying to say like anything else like that, but it's hard. And so if you ask me, have I thought about quitting? Like, yes, a lot, especially recently. Honestly, especially recently. But not in my action. I'm still there every day. I'm still training every day, a couple times a day. I'm still doing the workouts that I need to do. I'm still eating really well. I'm still keeping on top of my body as best as I can, and part of that's, because I have a great wife who kind of supports that. And in my head, I fight that battle a lot, especially recently. It wasn't always like that, but not in my actions, I guess, is the answer. So.
It's funny how many synchronicities are sort of happening in this conversation, because I'm talking to other people like yourself and at your level. They're saying very similar things. They're going through maybe some really tough times in terms of that, have great camps, things aren't turning out the way they want, or there's things personally that are happening within their lives. And it's this really trippy time for them, where it's like everything's sort of in the balance and the future's a bit unknown in a way. But I guess it's always that way, right?
Yeah. And I guess it's comforting that, you have other people going through like similar things, that you go through. And sometimes you even see them overcome that too. Who knows? Maybe I can be that. We'll see.
So you mentioned your camp. What does a camp look like for you? What would you recommend for others who are like thinking about making a go of it?
So it doesn't look the same as it did when I was younger. For me, when I say like a camp, it just usually means that like I'm getting more time to like train with guys my level. Like, so like either some people are coming to train with me, or I'm going to another place to get some more training in, and I'm doing more. I'm doing like extra. So honestly, like I told you, like I'm always like training for the most part, and always going through with my habits, with my diet and stuff like that. So to me, that doesn't like change that much. It's just more like, okay, I got to make this trip to go train with these guys extra 2 times this week, or I can't miss that time, and then we're going to do extra sessions, we're going to do extra rolls after, or I'm going to call somebody up and be like, can you come down to train? Sometimes I wish it was more structured, but at the same time, I'm fine with it not being that structured. One thing that I really do, though, and this is something that I do kind of in general, but like I said, like when I'm in camp, I just do it more often, is when I get the opportunity to train with world champion or somebody who won the trials or medaled at some big tournament, I bring that information like back to my students. Like, and what I mean by that is like, if something goes wrong in the roll, I really remember that. If something goes right in the roll, I really remember that too. Then if something goes wrong with my students and I didn't know why it went wrong, I'm going to ask one of my students, can we go in this position? Can you try to do this? Can you try to do this? And I'll try to have them do what the guy did and figure it out. And it's nice. And then once I feel like I figured it out, then I just try to do that the whole week or the whole 2-3 weeks. I remember I was training with Keith Krikorian recently, and we had some great sessions.
He's fantastic.
Yeah. He's great. Yeah, he's amazing. And he ended up escaping one position that I feel like is one of my better positions. I was like, okay, what happened there? And then I kind of was like figuring out and dissecting it and stuff like that. And then I was just trying to build that habit all my roles. So even though my student's not Keith, I'm still treating him like he's Keith. I'm like, okay, I can't let this shoulder escape out. I can't let this move there. Like you know what I mean? And so I'm just building that and getting that confidence back in that position. So when I'm like in camp, I just have more opportunities, thankfully, to like do that, because I seek it out more, I guess would be what I'm saying.
In terms of competing and disappointment in competing, this ties to a question that I get a lot of times from amateurs primarily. And I'm talking, regular working people who go to these tournaments and they're trying a lot. And they're just not getting gold. right?
Yeah.
And they're just really disappointed each time. What do you tell them? And then additionally, how has loss, how have you dealt with that? How have you thought about that? Does it, when you're sleeping, are you thinking about it too? Are you, are you dissecting all these things? Are you watching the video? Can you address those two things?
Yeah, I guess I can do like the student perspective first, and that would be number one, just the medal is like a byproduct of getting better, you know what I mean? You just got to focus on what went wrong and how you can fix that. And this was something too that Josh also kind of recommended and helped me with too. It's like you should aim to turn your weaknesses into strengths. So like when something gets exposed, like you couldn't finish a single leg, I remember this actually. So I was competing, it was my first tournament at Blackbelt, I think it was like Nogi Pan Ams, and I ended up taking third or something like that. And I lost basically because I couldn't finish my single leg. And then at Nogi Worlds I fought the same guy, but that whole 2 months I was just doing single leg, single leg, single leg, single leg, single leg. And I was able to score off my single leg against the same guy and beat him that next tournament. And that was only like a month and a half. I think like Nogi Pan Ams is October, Nogi Worlds was November. It ended up getting me to the next day and to the finals that year. So like you can let that emotion fuel you, but you can't let it wear on you. You have to ultimately just do the work that you need to do to get better. You know, some of that might be seeking out what you need to do and resources and asking your coach or watching an instructional, feeling out what's better for your body type. This move doesn't work good for my body type, even though my coach is telling me to do this move, I need to do this move. Or sometimes, no, maybe you need to trust your coach. It's like it takes a lot of trial and error. Don't give up on that process. And remember why you do it too. You do it because you enjoy it. Maybe I'm a weirdo. Maybe I'm like one of those purists. I hear all the time guys talk about like, oh, like it's some deep psychological thing where you want to like dominate a guy. I'm just like, I don't feel that way. like maybe, but like I don't feel that way consciously one bit. So, also ask them to be honest with themselves. Like, are you really doing the work? Or are you just showing up? Are you doing the deliberate work? That would be my approach as a student. For me, I guess when you're professional, you can say it's like different, but it depends on the loss. I had some hard losses to get over in my career, and the ones that are the hardest for me to get over, I don't want to sound like I'm whining because I don't want it to be taken that way, but like are the ones where I've had like a call not go my way that decide the whole match, and I feel like decide like my career, like, and at the end of the day it's up to me to get back out there and keep going. I remember my match with Dante at ADCC, and that still keeps me up at night sometimes, honestly. But it wasn't my day to get that call for whatever reason. But I try to set a good example, and at the end of the day, it's not even that I'm trying to set an example, it's just that I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm trying to do it again. So, sometimes life is getting busy now, but I'm still trying. So even though those ones, I think they keep me up more than the ones where I really like feel like, oh, this guy kicked my ass. Like, I almost would prefer that. It's easier to swallow.
So, John, what makes a great student?
Okay, that's a good question. Consistency is number one. If you're not consistent, there's no starting point. Like, you can't even have that conversation about what's great next. And I tell my students this too. It's like I'd rather see you consistently twice a week the whole year than see you 5 days or 6 days like this week and then not the rest of the month. Of course, like if you have a crazy schedule, I get it, like, and that's completely fine. But consistency, I'd say, is like the biggest thing. Also, like being a good teammate, I feel like is part of being a good student, and that's something that's like really like I think something that I value a lot as like a coach. Like, okay, like knowing not to hurt like your training partners, knowing who you're rolling with, not being too crazy like on the mat or hostile on the mat and stuff like that. That's big for me. And obviously an ability to be coachable, like an ability to take what I'm saying and trust it to some degree. Even if you don't like it or it doesn't make sense, at least giving it a shot. And there's some things that I remember with like when Marcello was coaching me that didn't make sense until after he told me. And what I mean is like after something went wrong, he would tell me something and then something would go wrong and I was like, oh, damn, I should have listened. So not always. There's some things that, like I said, you got to find out for yourself.
So, John, so conversely, what makes a great instructor, teacher, coach?
Man, I think you have to have a coach that cares about your growth, honestly, like, and not only cares about the growth, but like does the work to ensure that.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by growth?
I mean by like the student's overall, I guess, skill level and self-development as an athlete and even as like a person to some degree too, because I know you can separate that, and it's probably a healthy thing to do to separate the athlete from the person sometimes. Jiu-Jitsu can also be like a self-development tool too. You know, you want an instructor that's invested in that, that's invested in creating processes in the academy that facilitate that, and I think also you want an instructor that's approachable, that you can like talk to. And when I say talk to, I mean about jiu-jitsu. So like, like you don't need to unload like everything on the instructor, okay? But you know, sometimes friendships develop, and that's fine too. But you know, you want an instructor that's approachable, that you can ask questions to, and that you can bounce ideas off of. For me, it's helpful to have an instructor who's kind of like been through it also. I know nowadays you have coaches though who are great coaches who haven't competed, and you know, that's awesome. For me personally though, I always just really value that direct experience, you know. But what makes a great coach, maybe that doesn't need to be on there. And you know, definitely a coach who creates an environment that's positive and that's kind of, like I said, like facilitates that growth. So many times, like, I smile when I see like some of my purple belts helping the white belt, and I smile when they say, I don't want to say what I would have said, but like, good jiu-jitsu, like, you know what I mean, like, it's good advice, because sometimes I overhear something and I'm like, oh no, don't, like no, that arm doesn't go there, like like when you have good students, they kind of just help build that. I think as a coach is somebody who can produce that and then help that overall environment like through that, you know.
Can you give us like an example of a specific time you saw something special that maybe one of your students has done?
For me, like, the most obvious one is when you have a competitor go out there, like, they set their mind to what they want to do, they do all the work that they need to do, and they reap the fruits of that labor. Like, that's just such a blessing, like, when all that works out. But we see that like all the time. It's still special, but for me, what I like to see is sometimes we get somebody who you think like, this guy's going to quit in like 2 weeks, or this guy is just like, he's a little bit off, like something's like not right. And for me, as an instructor, I really get a lot of joy seeing that person like assimilate, feel like included, like, and
just grow, right?
And grow through that, or they change like their lifestyle in a more healthier way. And it's just because it's like, we probably never would talk ever, but because we both like jiu-jitsu, now you have a community. You know, people who are going to, like, look after you. And sometimes it's almost just, like, even though it's not that, like, he changes completely. It's like, yeah, he's a little weird, but that's okay. That's our guy. Like everything's fine. Everything's good. Everything's good. He's part of our team. And we're like, yeah, like, you get that guy who comes in, like, way out of shape. And it's like, I don't know if he's going to last, but he lasts. Those are the kind of stuff that, as a coach, believe it or not, that sometimes mean almost more to me than, like, the medal on the podium, you know.
So in terms of your jiu-jitsu, what's interesting you as of late? Like, technically, what are you working on, and what are you sort of obsessed with at this moment?
Yeah, so like I'm always like thinking about, like, I try to like work on one thing in each spot of my game at a time. So like I have like one pass that I'm working, or one sweep, or one submission. And more recently, I've been kind of messing around more with like calf slicer, as funny as that sounds.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah. So I've been messing around a little bit with that. I've been doing like some just sharpening, some passing, like turning pass. What people think is like the octopus position. So if you look back at like old videos, right, like of Marcello training, he would put himself there on purpose, like from the top position. This was one of his go-to moves, was to pummel that kind of like reverse underhook and basically give the person the octopus position, right? And he would just take their back or pass them all the time. And I feel like, you know, the guys on bottom now are a little bit sharper in terms of like their offense from that. So it's been nice because I still think the principles that worked back then still work to shut down that game, but I just need to make them sharper. I need to like revisit that or pay attention to one more detail. Like, oh, I can't let him get to there. If he gets to there, he's going to get ahead of me. And this is like what I always do with my game is like that's how I try to like stay ahead and grow is like sometimes I'll choose like a move like random like calf slicer, like okay, like I'm just going to try this move, see how it goes. And if it sticks, great. If it doesn't stick, no problem. And then other times it's like little refinements that sometimes if you look at them doesn't look like much of a difference, but it's a big difference.
How would you describe your style now?
I think I'm always trying to go forward and do jiu-jitsu. It might not be at like a fast pace or with like a fancy move all the time, but probably it would help me out not to go forward sometimes and just let stuff come to me a little bit more now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, style-wise, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say. I can do the takedowns. I can play from the bottom. I can play for the top. I'm pretty like well-rounded. I'm not like a guy who's like, like, oh, this guy's going to pull guard every time. It's like, no, maybe I'm going to pull guard. Maybe I'm going to do takedowns. I'm not a guy, too, who only plays guard. Like, I had training partners like that. They don't come on top unless they're getting the berimbolo. Like you get what I mean? Like so they're just going to stay in guard the whole time and attack from the guard or get your back. It's like, no, like I come on top. I don't know what kind of style, I guess.
I like to ask the people about like jiu-jitsu dogma in terms of like maybe old thinking that's not applicable anymore, or maybe it is. Have you experienced anything like that? What are your thoughts? Because you've seen the evolution of this game too, and it's changed so much, and there's been such an explosive growth and evolution. That's not to say the old stuff doesn't work. Are there any sort of things where your ideas have evolved or changed or beliefs that you had?
I feel like things are getting like repackaged a lot lately. Sometimes they're more fleshed out, which is nice. It's kind of like what I was telling you about the octopus guard just a second ago. It's like I'm fleshing it out more, like because the guy on bottom has more stuff fleshed out, but like it's still the same move. Like, the rotolotine, like no disrespect to those. I don't even think they coined the term themselves. I think other people coined it, which is great. They're amazing at the move, right? But Braulio did that to Marcello in 2009. A lot of these positions like that guys are doing, I can show you so many similar positions, or it's just a little bit different. It's like, oh, body lock passing. It's like, they didn't call that body lock passing. And I've been a body lock passer, right, like for like a while, but like it just called that, oh, let's just force the half guard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's useful. I think it's interesting, like the etymology or whatever you want to call it. Like maybe it helps things get a little bit more like organized and, like I said, like fleshed out. And maybe certain things have changed. Like I think certainly like the biggest arguments that you can make that I think there's like no denying, like the leg lock game is definitely way more advanced than where it was at. A couple other things, I think the wrestling has gotten better. The takedown game has gotten better too. You can make that argument also. But, everything else, it's even that to some degree. It's like, okay, so it's gotten better, but has it not been around? Like wrestling has been around. It's like we just caught up to wrestling, right? It wasn't like wrestling hasn't been around. So, I don't know. There's that saying, like, there's nothing new under the sun, right? It could just be, look, it looks way different than 1990 jiu-jitsu. You know what I'm saying? So, so, yes and no.
So does the money.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's true. It's tough to say, but probably around like the 2000 mark to maybe 2015-ish. Like we've been pretty far along as far as it goes to fleshing out modern jiu-jitsu. And like if you think about who those guys are, and I'm not saying they're the inventors of it, I'm saying like they're the guys who like you'd kind of like credit with it probably. It's like obviously like Marcello, Hoffa, Hodger, Leandro Lowe. If you want to say a leg lock guy like Lister or Eddie Cummings too, that's fine. I'm trying to think of other guys, maybe Homo Bahal maybe or something. But my point is, if you take those 5 guys or 6 guys, whatever we just named, and you look at the techniques being used today, I bet you can find they're almost the same techniques or some derivation. Now, it might not look the same. Like the application may be much more dynamic in today's jiu-jitsu. It also may be more of a roundabout way to get there, but it's still nonetheless the past. Like Marcelo's been half guard passing with the underhook and the head control since 2003 or whatever. And then, Gordon's doing it again and everybody's like, whoa. And it's just like, yeah, no, like he's amazing at it, of course, but like this is not a new thing. You know, you know what I'm saying? He might have fleshed it out. He might be doing it against better guards now, and he figured out his way to get there, and that's all amazing.
I think a lot of these things have sort of, especially the leg game, has been more packaged as systems now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's good to. I think it's good to have that. I don't think it's bad to have that, but at the same time, too, like this is an art, and you got to have that room for creativity, and maybe that's the reason why you're seeing such a pushback for this ecological approach, right? So now we're swinging back the other direction where it's like, oh, it's all about creativity, it's all about this. Like, no, you should probably learn how to do an armbar, like you know what I mean? So it's somewhere in the middle, I think, and we're just swinging right now.
Well, you brought up Eddie Cummings. Can you talk about your interactions with Eddie and your experiences with him and what's that's been like? You know, he has this mystique, this thing about him now all of a sudden, you know, since he just sort of walked away at his peak.
Eddie and I came up when we were, I think he got his blue belt like 6 months after me or something like that.
Yeah, I heard you were taking it to him early on.
You know what's funny is like
people were whispering in my ear telling me these things.
I still have like videos of that and stuff like that. I wonder like, but I'm not the type of guy to like post that stuff. So obviously it's way different. You know what I mean? But anyway,
we'll watch it later. Off camera.
Yeah, exactly. But I was training longer than he was at the time, and we were still young. And, you know, Eddie was a numbers guy. We met at college. He was in the graduate program. I was, like, way younger than him, too, which is part of the reason that you got to think about why he kind of walked away when he did. I think when he walked away, he's in his 40s now, for sure, like, at least. He might have been 8 years older than me. So, I'm sorry, but anywho, he was a numbers guy, right? So, I wasn't that guy. Like, going back to what we said about, like, drilling, like, I wasn't the guy who needed to drill. I was more like, feel it, let me feel the move. Okay, this feels right. I'm confident in doing the training. Okay, good. If it doesn't feel right, I'm going to drill it until it feels right. But chances are why it doesn't feel right is not because of anything else than my mechanics are wrong. But Eddie was not that. Eddie was like, I got to do these reps. I would come into the gym and he would be before and he'd be after just repping. And I think at the time there was this Eddie Bravo video. And you have to remember YouTube was actually pretty new back then too. You're talking about, what is this, like 2007. And he talked about him like getting your reps in. Like, what's your magic number that's going to make you the master of this move? Is it 1,000? Is it 1,500? Is it 300? And it's like, you just got to keep doing it until you hit that number. Okay, and that there might have been some wisdom to that, but going back to what you said too, there's probably some dogma to that also, okay? Anyway, Eddie, I think, heard that video, and being a numbers guy, it just clicked for him. For his personality, that's what worked for him. That's the way he was like in the training, is he was very numbers driven, at least when I was coming up with him. He might have changed. So yeah, we trained together, and we were friends too. Like, he had a kid at the time, and I was around his kid. We would go to the beach and this and that, and he would come to my parents' house and stuff. It was cool. We were friends, and we still kept in touch. And probably a couple years later, we got together, and we would train kind of like in private, like nobody really knew. I don't know if this stuff was going on, but there was like some stupid like rivalry stuff between some of the guys at Marcello's that I wasn't involved in, and some of the guys at Henzo's that he wasn't involved in. So we would just kind of just be like, well, we still like each other. I don't know what their problem is. So we would still train once in a while together, and that was always great to be able to train with him. But man, it's been so long, honestly, since I spoke to him, and it could be my fault too. I'm sure his number's still the same. I just haven't reached out, and vice versa. You know, it's been a bit since we spoke, so if you're looking for answers about where the mysterious man's gone, I don't know. I guess that would be the thing that stood out to me. And Eddie was always a very nervous competitor. That's one thing that's interesting. He'd be freaking out before a competition, like freaking out. And he would need to almost verbalize it to get it out of his system, if it was getting out of his system, or whatever he was doing to regulate that emotion in his head. For me, I couldn't be around that. Too much noise for me, you know what I mean? But afterwards, like there was times where we competed at Grapplers Quest together, if you even remember what that is. We'd come together afterwards with our medals and go out together as a team and stuff like that. It was good. Yeah, it was great.
And you guys walked away with your $1 million checks. And
yeah, right. I think Grapplers Quest might have gave out $1,000 for the Advanced Absolute, but we weren't that big, so we didn't do it. So yeah.
So speaking of $1 million, your thoughts on the whole Craig Jones Invitational?
Yeah. Oh man, it's interesting, right? On one side, and I think I tend to lean on this side. It's so great to see somebody challenge one of these two organizations, honestly. And I mean that so respectfully, because the organizations have, in their own way, done a lot for the sport, right? But that being said, like anything else, when you get so big, something's got to give at some point. And especially when you're prideful enough to think that you're not. Like, you were prideful enough to be like, oh yeah, go ahead, have at it. Let's see what you can do. Challenge us. You think you're gonna ruin us? Like, Like, if you're that prideful, if you're willing to engage in that, you got to be willing to take the fall. And I think that's what happened to some degree, not all the way. ADCC is still gonna do its thing. It's still gonna be great. It's still going to be an amazing event, I'm sure. And the bottom line is that didn't make sense to us as athletes. You know, that never made sense to us. Let's invest in this multi-million-dollar team mobile arena and not up the pay that hasn't been upped in decades, right? That never made sense to us.
It's so cool how the market's opened up, for this other product. Obviously there's a demand for it. There's a lot of interest, galore interest in it. Look what that gap or that blind side opened up for you guys.
Yeah. What I wish would happen in the whole thing, and it's probably not going to happen because negativity tends to generate a lot of attention, but what I wish to happen in the whole thing would be like, yeah, you were right to some degree. We messed up. We're not perfect.
Yeah, you adapt or you die, right? It could be that product goes stale after a while or not. Maybe they do adapt.
Yeah. And it's, at the end of the day, it's part of it is that argument. It's business, so, and it's nothing personal. It's business, and there's that argument too. Look, if either one of them asked me to compete, I would say yes, obviously, you know what I mean? So it's just getting more opportunities, for us too, which is always a good thing. So at the end of the day, who wins out? It's the athlete. Maybe even ADCC wins out too. Don't kid yourself. Like, don't think that negative attention isn't good attention in this thing as well. I like seeing it. I don't know if I'd be the type of person to get directly involved in that clash, if you will, but the result or the reasoning behind it makes sense.
The introduction of kids now starting at scale globally at such a young age. I mean, I'm talking, I bring this up a lot. 5-year-olds, or even younger sometimes, with, little kids. And they're performing now at levels that are pretty unimaginable to what we've seen historically. Your viewpoints on that? I mean, some people are saying the days of like the 30-year-old guy starting jiu-jitsu to win some major title are gone now. Your thoughts on these kids? I mean, you see them. You've got a kids program.
Yeah, me and my friend were talking the other day about kind of that what you just said about the 30-year-old starting and winning world or something like that. It's like, I remember in like 2011, we would have these guys who would have like full-time jobs in the city, like, and then they still managed to like train at night, and they'd go compete at world tournaments and sometimes be like getting deep into the rounds, and we're just like, this is awesome. Like, it's almost like a little bit of a, like, anybody can win. It's just about what you put into it kind of a thing, and maybe that is going away to some degree. I don't know. We can never know.
Well, there's always going to be an anomaly or a freak, sure. Rodriguez's brother.
Yeah. It's a fine line with kids and how much to push them and stuff like that. So, I just hope some of that doesn't go too far. But I think it's exciting. It's only going to make the sport grow. Jiu-Jitsu, I think, is so positive for adults and obviously for children too. Yeah, some of these kids are just amazing, right? There's a dark side to some of it too. Like the Rotolo brothers and like Mika and a couple other those guys were those kids, right? Then when I say there's a dark side to it, like, you hear stuff and honestly you see stuff too, even with some of these guys like popping on these tests and stuff like that with like the PEDs and stuff like that, and it's like you just hope that doesn't trickle down to the kids, and it already has to some degree, sadly. But other than that, it's amazing, and I think it's only going to grow the sport and raise the level and push the competitive scene more. I just, especially for kids, hope it stays tame. It's one of those things where it's like that UFC, WWE crap talking culture is kind of seeping its way into the sport. It can definitely help grow it, and you can, like we said before, with the negative attention, you can see that, maybe coming back to being a thing that kind of helps, but it doesn't sit with me well to see some kids acting that way, and you see that sometimes, and people post that and even like glorify that, whereas like wrestling, that never, like, I'm not talking about WWE, I'm talking about like, kids wrestling, that doesn't happen at all. Like, that's not the culture there. Yeah, I'm concerned about those two things, but other than that, I think it's amazing. It's only going to push the sport, and we have our kids programs too, and seeing them go out and compete, and even if they lose, they cry. I just had one kid, he was competing, and he's crying in the match. He's crying in the match, still competing, he's losing, and then he takes the kid down and wins, and he's crying the whole time. And I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. Well, I think it's awesome. You know why I think it's awesome? Because he overcame what he needed to overcome to come out on top. Because there was no guarantee he was going to do that. I think that's really empowering. So, like, that experience can only help them, I think, in life, even if they don't decide to do jiu-jitsu long-term or competitively, you know. For sure. I had a great time talking, and thank you for having me on and for being interested and taking the time. Hopefully it wasn't too much rambling, but yeah.
No way. This is awesome, man. You were on the bucket list, definitely, of someone I wanted to get on the show. So I thank you so much. Like, again, as someone who's like inspired me in my jiu-jitsu so early on, and with all your content, man, and influenced a lot via Marcello as well. Man, this is just a tremendous honor to have you on. So thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Adolfo. I hope we can do it again soon.
So, John, if people want to get a hold of you and be hip to what you're doing and your academy and everything, you know, how do we get a hold of you or whatever?
You can always just follow my Instagram, JT Satava, or you can, if you're interested in any of the schools, it's peakjj.com or peakjjtx.com, depending on where you're at. And come by anytime, even if you're just visiting. We welcome visitors and would love to train with you. And I'm pretty approachable, so yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Adolfo Ferranda. Remember, join the VIP membership, get uncensored early versions of the show, like, subscribe, and check out our merchandise and swag at our store. And thanks so much, you guys, for watching and listening out there for another week. I'm Adolfo. Take care. And John, thanks again, man.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys.